listener production.
Hi, I'm Sacha Barbour Gatt. Welcome to The Briefing. Conflict and tension in the Middle East have been at an all-time high since the October 7 attacks on Israel and the subsequent war in Gaza. Tens of thousands of people have been killed, an endless barrage of missile strikes have been launched, and attempts to end the fighting have repeatedly failed. In the last few weeks, fears of a widening conflict have grown as Israel and Iranian-backed militant group Hezbollah exchange fire. So why are Israel and Iran at each other's throats? And are we really at the doorstep of an all-out war in the region? Today we're breaking it all down for you. Our guest is Kylie Moore-Gilbert. She's an expert in Middle East political science and she joins me now. Kylie, welcome to The Briefing. Can you explain to us how long there have been tensions between Israel and Iran?
Well, there's been tensions between Israel and Iran since the formation of the Islamic Republic in Iran following their revolution in 1979. Israel was an ally of the previous regime in Iran led by the Shah. And when that regime was overthrown in a revolution, the relations very, very steeply downgraded. The Israeli embassy was closed down and hostile tensions began between these two powers.
Why are we seeing tensions flaring, especially right now, between Iran and Israel? And when I say Iran, I also mean, we're seeing Hezbollah and, of course, what happened with the Hamas leader just overnight. Why is this all seeming to hit a fever pitch right this second?
A lot of these tensions have been bubbling and, exploding out into the open since the horrific October 7 Hamas attacks on Israel. As you noted, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, other militia groups in Iraq and Syria, they're all basically Iran. They're proxies of Iran, some of which do Iran's bidding. Whether or not Hamas was doing Iran's bidding directly when it attacked Israel on October 7, we don't know. But certainly they received funding, arms, training, and rhetorical support from Tehran. So all of this is in the context of the broader war that Israel is conducting in Gaza. And Israel has been very clear that it is taking the fight to what it calls the head of the snake, being Iran itself. And the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, who was the head of Hamas's political bureau in downtown Tehran yesterday, is just the latest salvo in this long-running war between the two.
What role do these militant groups that are backed by Iran play in this broader kind of landscape of the Middle East? Because from my understanding of Hezbollah, they're based in Lebanon and they operate out of Lebanon. Hamas is in Gaza and Palestine. Who else is there and how do they all kind of create a picture? And is it all of these groups versus Israel, or do they have other quote-unquote enemies as well?
So all of these groups formed as a result of their particular domestic contexts in whatever country they're located in. So Hezbollah, for example, emerged during the Lebanese civil war in the 1980s. Hamas emerged also in the 80s in the context of the Palestinian struggle against Israel and the First Intifada. The Houthi movement has long-standing roots in Yemen. It's a minority religious sect, the Zaydi Shia, who've been in Yemen for centuries, if not millennia. And it very much emerged as a fighting force during the war that erupted in Yemen after the Arab Spring in 2011. So each militant group that Iran is sponsoring has its own domestic political context. But aligning with Iran and receiving training and weapons from Iran have very much elevated their power and their status within those domestic contexts and enabled Iran to also use them to attack Iran's enemies, most notably in the region, both the United States and Israel.
Does Israel have any specific allies in the Middle East that, I suppose are on its side in this kind of evolving conflict?
It's really interesting. So traditionally, the Arab countries in the Middle East have been enemies of Israel and have fought a number of wars against them. But particularly with the rise of Iran and also the Arab Spring uprisings and the counter pushback against them, we've seen a number of Arab states in a more covert shadow fashion cozy up to Israel and position themselves against Iran and against the more radical Islamist axis that Iran is wielding in the region, because that axis is a threat to them and their interests too. And these countries signed what under the Trump administration came to be known as the Abraham Accords with Israel. So countries in the Gulf like Bahrain and, also Saudi Arabia being the dominant power in the Gulf is thought to have relations with Israel, although not formally in a diplomatic sense, as well as countries like Sudan, Morocco, etc. And then we have Egypt and Jordan, who have long-standing peace treaties with Israel. So we're seeing an interesting kind of regrouping in the Middle East, basically reorienting around this threat of Iran. But this has sort of moderated a little bit in recent years too, as those countries have also reopened diplomatic connections to Iran and made overtures to Tehran as well.
What is the risk to Israel? We hear a lot about the Iron Dome, and we hear about missiles and rocket launches towards Israel, but they rarely make an impact to the point of causing casualties or damage. Is there a greater risk to Israel from something else if these groups were able to coordinate better and come together if they decided that's what they wanted to do? Could they get around things like the Iron Dome, or would they have to find another way, to attack Israel?
Oh, the Iron Dome is not an impenetrable system. It's been designed to guard against small-scale rocket attacks coming out of Gaza. It's not been designed to prevent ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, or anything, even drones. The Houthis managed to kill one Israeli civilian in Tel Aviv just a couple of weeks ago using a drone. So the Iron Dome, it's a very useful tool, but it certainly hasn't been able to prevent those large-scale attacks, most notably being on April 13 when Iran launched more than 300 projectiles toward Israel in retaliation for an Israeli strike on an Iranian general in Damascus. And it needed the United States and some of those other Arab regimes that have sort of cold partnered with Israel to shoot them out of the sky. Israel was unable to handle those on their own. So they have, in many examples, targeted Israel directly, some of these militia groups, and got through the Iron Dome. So it's not an impenetrable force by any means.
What role does the West have to play in this? And also, by that same token, China, Russia, India, how can this change or evolve global relationships and the geopolitical sphere?
Well, it's really interesting, the Chinese involvement in particular. We saw just last week China announcing that it had brokered an intra-Palestinian peace accord between the two rival factions of the PA and Hamas, something that's been attempted on multiple occasions in the past and has always failed. I mean, Hamas, of course, ousted the PA from Gaza, killing a number of Palestinian Authority representatives there, and installing itself as a kind of a terrorist pseudo-state ruling that territory. So there's a lot of bad blood between the two groups, but China was able to sort of broker at least this statement of some sort of accord. The jury's out as to whether that will have any impact on the ground, particularly with the assassination of Haniyeh, who was involved in that and was seen as a little bit more pragmatic, although he's got heaps of blood on his hands and is an arch-terrorist. Than some of the more, hardline, warmongering elements of Hamas, like Yahya Sinwar, who's currently in Gaza. So the Chinese have attempted to involve themselves, as they had engineered in the past a Saudi-Iran diplomatic accord, which saw the restoration of relations between the two countries, and that has held so far, although there's not a lot of love lost between them either. So we have seen other players in the region flexing their muscles, in addition to the United States, which has played a historical role. But there are real fears that this could lead to a global conflagration of some sort, that they might not be able to confine it to Israel, Gaza, and that it might spill, say, northwards into Lebanon or even between Israel and Iran. Although I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, because it's not in the interests of Israel nor Iran to have a direct war at this time.
Well, that was going to lead to my next and final question, was around the fears. We keep hearing, escalating tensions, and there are fears of all-out war in the region. You don't think that that's where this conflict is heading towards?
I think there's a significant danger, especially inadvertently, that somebody could overshoot. They're playing a really, really difficult game right now. Someone could miscalculate and it could lead to unintended consequences. But I don't think that it is in the interests of Iran, which is a rational actor and has played a very smart game using its proxies to attack Israel, using plausible deniabilities to avoid getting itself entangled directly in any conflict other than that 13th of April attack. So I don't think, Iran being a rational actor and being very keen to avoid an all-out war is going to take steps that could lead to that, although it could miscalculate, of course. And I believe Israel also, it's already fighting one war. It's already got a significant threat of war in the north with Hezbollah as well. It doesn't want to open further fronts and stretch itself further when it's dealing with so much right now. So I do think they will pull back from the brink, and there will be a lot of scrambling and diplomatic efforts happening right now in everywhere from Washington to Beijing to Riyadh to try and get them to pull back and to prevent this from escalating further.
That was Kylie Moore-Gilbert, an expert in Middle Eastern political science, speaking with me there. And that is all for this episode of The Briefing. If you do enjoy the podcast and what we do, we'd love it if you could share this ep with someone you think might enjoy it too. And we also put up tons of video content on TikTok and Instagram. We are also on YouTube. Search Listener Newsroom. I'm Sacha Barbour Gatt. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.